Hey, everybody. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day. I just wanted to touch base a little bit on a topic that always gets brought up to me when I'm having a conversation with somebody. And that is what is my opinion around having so many promotions in Northern California? I think it's great. I do. But like anything else, right? There's an upside and there's a downside. So I think it's great. I think it gives all the young fighters a platform to fight in front of their hometown crowd. As a ex fighter myself, there's nothing like it. I was able to live out something for myself where I got to fight at Arco Arena, I got to fight at Rayleigh Field, and these were the big areas in my hometown. Things that I used to envision as a kid, like, oh man, what would it be like to fight at Rayleigh Field? It was like a fantasy, and when it happened, it was an amazing feeling, and it was a local promoter, right? Um, a little bigger promotion when I fought at Arco Arena, but it was a dream. Being an 8-year-old kid up in the stands, with my dad watching Tony Lopez and Monumental Pies, man, I was able to walk out of that tunnel myself and fight. So I think it's a great thing that the fighters get an opportunity to fight in front of their hometown crowd, their family, their friends. It's great. I think that every fighter should experience that. And with the promotions, being able to be out there and with so many fighters, everybody gets a chance. So that's the upside, right? I think that it's a tremendous way to develop and give a platform to the fighters. So I think it's great. The downside, uh, the downside that I see it is, more of like a concern. I don't think it's really like a problem of a lack of, right? But I do think that at some point, right, are the fighters getting the proper fights to develop to be ready when they get those phone calls from the bigger promotions? We all know that the bigger promotions have the budget to be able to create a star, right? Locally, you have to be willing to take a little harder fight for less money, and it can be kind of um, is the risk worth the reward type of situation, right? But I really think that if the local promotions can increase their budget for their A side fighters to get better developing B side fighters and not recycle them, we see that a lot, right? The truth is that we see a lot of the opponents being recycled over and over and over here locally. A lot of the same weight class fighters have very similar opponents, and the outcomes are usually the same, right? You can't really judge like a first round knockout from one fighter and then the B side guy went it's really hard to really gauge what that looks like, right? But I will say this: I think that it puts it puts the promoters in a kind of a weird situation, right? If they could work together and come together to create the best matchups at some point. I'm just saying that when you get to 8-0, 7-0, 9-0, it gets really hard to stay local, right? But I also feel that when you're 6, 7, 8, 9-0, are you have to measure out how those developing fights came about. How did you get that record, right? Do you test yourself? I believe that that the fighter should test themselves a little bit to, maybe against another Northern California fighter who has a similar record, or, maybe like a 5-1 type of record, 5-2, or maybe an opponent that's like 9-2, 9-1, just to see. Um, I will say that sometimes the upset will happen, right? But it will allow you to kind of figure out where you're at as a fighter, and um, if you're ready for that next step. So I think the big thing is that if the promotions can work together, everybody will make money because a lot of these A side fighters are selling over 100 tickets. I think it's kind of like mandatory now that a fighter sells 100 tickets to be on a show. So we know the fighters can sell the tickets. We know that the arenas will get bigger, the audience will get bigger, but people will be entertained, right? There's nothing worse than spending $200 to go to a fight and watching a fight where you are 100% positive that a certain fighter that's being promoted is going to win, right? There's like, you're not even being entertained at that point. It's just more like a support system. I'm there because I'm supporting the individual because we're friends, we're family, we go to the same gym. But I, as a boxing fan, want to see a fight that is entertaining, to see who's going to challenge themselves. I love, like, and I'm not saying that Northern California fighters need to fight each other, but I do think that some fighters need to challenge themselves more than others, right? And I think that the promoters can really build a beautiful card where it's interesting because you don't know what'll happen, right? Like, some fights are equally matched, and some will say that it's a landslide, but is it really? Is that fighter's record really what it is, right? Look, I'm a big advocate for Northern California, and I love the fact that there's a dozen promoters. Now, I think, and I'm just going to try to name them off. There's quite a few. I know we have Toscano. I know we have G Squad Entertainment. I know we have G1. I know we have Nasser, who, credit to Nasser. He's been doing this for a long time. He's pretty consistent. You have Elite Underdog now out of the Bay Area. You have Lions Den Promotions. And by the way, when it comes to the professional game, Lions Den is definitely leading the way. They have the majority of the professionals. They're building great cards. They have a lot of good fighters. So, and what can I say? Man, what can I say? They pretty much dominate the pro game, right? So any card that wants to be successful is going to have a lot of the Lions Den fighters on there. I'm trying to think. If there's anything else, leave a comment if I left one out. There's West Side Promotions. They haven't had a card out in Northern California in about a year or over a year. So, but they're still there. They have a solid foundation with a couple of fighters from the Central Valley. So, tons of promoters, right? But how do they come together to create a mega card? A card where we can really put on for the fans. I mean, I would love to get the opportunity to be there and apply for a media credential for a fight card where we can throw a certain fight on that is going to generate a lot of interest. Like, there's a couple of fights out there that really draw my interest, and I'll leave that for another video. But I have my own dream card in my head, and I would love to see those fights come to fruition, right? But let me say this to kind of close out. One, I think it's great that there's a lot of promoters out there that are giving a lot of opportunity to the fighter to fight in their hometowns, as long as they're selling tickets, because it is pretty expensive to have a show. And then for the downside, there's some downside, but there's a lot of upside to that downside. So I hope you guys can understand what I'm saying is, don't put on a fighter because they sell 100 tickets and get them somebody that they are 100% confident they can beat. Put them in there with a fighter that they can develop their skills to create a champion, right? To move them into a level of where they can compete with other prospects who are doing this full time, who are, being paid by a manager, paid by a promoter to box, right? So that when they get that phone call, they're going to go in there and shock them. I think that if giving them the right fights to slowly develop into like professionals and market themselves and, get sponsors and all, that's great. But when you go in, let me backtrack. I just caught myself before I close out. It's great to market yourself. It's great to highlight a video where you're knocking somebody down. It's great to get $12,000-$15,000 in sponsorships. It's great. But what it comes down to is when you get that phone call and you are getting an opportunity to fight on a big promotion. Are you going to do that to highlight that you were at the show? Hey, I'm here. I'm fighting on this card, getting a bunch of sponsors. Or are you there ready to win? Right? That's what it's about. I want to see a fighter go out and win the fight that they're not supposed to win. Northern California, the Central Valley, has a tremendous amount of prospects, but there's a lot of talent out there that I think we will have a world champion very soon. Um, you know, Jesse Haro was able to compete for a world title. I mean, nobody can ever take that away from him. Um, you know, and he didn't have an easy road. He had to take on some really hard challenges, but he got an opportunity that a lot of people won't. You know, out of out of the 20 or more prospects that we have, half of them will make it to a level, and then the half of that will make it to a little bit more of a higher level, um, and probably 1% of that, or maybe 1.5% of that, are going to win a world title. Right now, you know, we're looking at like somebody like Amari Jones, who's going to be on the verge of a world title. And I think that everybody needs to get around to support him. But he's not fighting locally, which is my point. He's on a big promotion with a big budget, fighting on bigger cards that is going to bring bigger exposure. That's my point, right? So um, develop yourself to get ready for those bigger fights, win the fights. It's not always about the money, right? And promoters work with each other, and let's create a champion coming out of Northern California, Central Valley, um, coming out of one of the smaller promotions. It'd be an amazing story. That's my thought. If you agree, great. If you don't, I hope that this doesn't create any kind of problem. I'm not a hater. I just, really think that we have a good thing going, but there's some downside to it. And if you don't agree with me on the downside of it, then maybe you should, just see it from a different perspective, right? And I'm always open to seeing it. That's all I got. Till the next video, thank you. Peace.